Hi, I'm Dr. Janice Morrow. Thanks for joining us for another episode of American Mood Swings, where we talk about the brain and all things related to mental health. Welcome. And I'm really excited today my guest is George Anderson. He has been in the Los Angeles area for over 50 years now. We're working in the field of anger management and in emotional intelligence. He worked with the Los Angeles court systems for whenever they needed a referral. His company, Anderson and Anderson, was the main point source where everybody was referred to for their anger management, which led to consulting throughout the country and the globe. Companies such as UPS, Xerox, and several 100,000 employees in anger management and emotional regulation skills. He was born in Jackson, Mississippi. Grew up there, made his way out to Cal State, Los Angeles, and studied at the UCLA School of Social Work. And then he received the Woodrow Wilson Fellowship to attend Smith College in Massachusetts, where he got his master's. And then he went on for further training at Harvard University in adolescent and child psychology. And now he made it, and then he made his way back to Los Angeles, and the rest is history. So we're going to just be talking about a little bit about his life and his skill set and what he's doing now. He does have some upcoming workshops in emotional regulation, so we'll get to that at the end. But thank you, George, for being here with us.
Okay. So,
So let's talk a little bit about your background and training that led you to working with the Los Angeles courts for so many years in anger management and domestic violence.
yeah, I was initially selected by the Superior Court, no, excuse me, by the legislature in California as an expert witness. And so the first job or responsibility that I had was advising on legislation regarding domestic violence. And so that in the process of developing helping pass the first domestic violence legislation, which was California Code 1203.097, I was aware of what was needed or what was going to occur. And so I immediately began doing research and writing a book, a curriculum on batteries intervention. So my book called A Ray of Hope was the first published curriculum on batteries intervention in California. And it was so popular, we translated it or had it translated in Vietnamese, Chinese, Japanese, Russian, and so on.
Very exciting.
So, yes, so that as a result of that, about 3 years later, I received a call from a three-judge panel in Los Angeles. And the judge speaking said, we're on a panel call. And he says that we are aware of your publication in Batter's Intervention. The court is very pleased with how well it's structured. And we want to know if you would be willing to write a curriculum on anger management. So anger management had not been anything of particular interest to me, but I said yes. And so I did some research, wrote a curriculum, published the book, A Ray of Hope on, I guess that was gaining control of ourselves on anger management. And the court made me what they call anyway, it was my responsibility to train people in anger management, but it was the court's agreement that only providers who were certified in anger management in my model would receive or could receive referrals from the courts, probation, parole, and so on in Los Angeles County. And that lasted until the pandemic. And then the next phase of my development was again a request from a physician from Tenet, T-E-N-E-T Healthcare out of Dallas, Texas. And he says, we're aware of the work that you've done in emotional intelligence. We want to know if you would be willing to write a curriculum for physicians whose behavior is defined as disruptive, which is anger management, right? And if we like it, he says, we will use you for our 80, I think he says 68 hospitals,
Wow.
and we will also market you. And so that I wrote the curriculum. which is called what the name is that one? The Practice of Control. All these books are on Amazon.com. But in any case, I wrote that and he liked it, and they did exactly what they said. And so it wound up during the pandemic. I received the largest contract that I've ever received, and it was from Saudi German Health. They have, I believe, one medical school in Saudi Arabia, 100, how many hospitals? Nine hospitals in Saudi Arabia, three in Egypt, and two in Germany. And so the contract was for me to provide emotional intelligence assessments and coaching for any physician who is demonstrating or behaving as if they may be bordering on or experiencing burnout,
Oh,
which
oh,
would include sometimes disruptive behavior. And so the idea of that doing most of the that particular time. And I have major corporations in this country who refer exclusively, which is what I do now, is just physicians. So it's like a 3 month program, which amounts to 12 sessions, beginning with an assessment, a very elaborate assessment. And that same assessment, we give it again at the end. So it's evidence based. Does it work? We can tell you yes or no because we'll give you the results before and after.
okay. Well, it's such interesting work. It's kind of exciting to hear you say like world when the world reaches out to you and your reputation gets out there. I mean, it's amazing. Um, I have I have three brothers, and it's funny because I do, they always say you're born the way you are, but I had one brother. He kind of was the hot-blooded one in the family. It kind of seemed like he had the temper for all five of, for the five other members of the family. Back in the day, this was, and then he went to counseling, and this was, but this kind of subject matter wasn't really talked about. I know he went to, my mom took him to some counseling, but I want to, we're going to just talk a little bit about anger and then we're going to delve into the emotional. But I did want to ask you about one case that's been all over the news, and I just because it's been really affecting me, and I just feel really sad about it. I don't know if you've heard. There was two young men in Frisco, Texas, about a month ago. They were at some kind of a sporting event, a high school event. There was some kind of a seating dispute, right? Somebody was sitting where they weren't supposed to be sitting. Another guy got up and said, "Move." Something that we could see at any kind of sporting event happen. But one kid was fatally stabbed in the heart. The others going to. Did you hear about this case?
No, no.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Well, I just wanted the reason I bring it up is because I've been really sad about it because one young man, he's only like 17, a whole future ahead of him. He's passed away now. He died at the scene, and the other boy will probably spend the rest of his life in jail. But he didn't have a criminal record. But I can't help. That's why I really love talking to people like yourself. And I watched what happened with my brother. There was nothing particularly violent when we were growing up, but he would get in a lot of fights. And I wonder, like, I always, when I see something like that, like, I wonder if these skills could be implemented or introduced like in elementary school or junior high. Like, at what point can we start really teaching these skills? Because by the time you're an adolescent and your hormones are raging. But well, I just was curious. So I want to talk about like how can you I've just listened to some of your other discussions, and you talk about how anger is not a pathological condition, but rather a secondary emotion coming from deeper feelings of shame and embarrassment. And I think that really hit me because I think a lot of people don't look in the mirror and admit to themselves, like, I feel shame, I'm embarrassed, and it just comes out. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Let me go back to the first question that you asked, I think, a minute ago. And it's regarding emotional intelligence. You said, how soon should these be introduced?
Yeah,
So the answer is it should be in preschool.
Grace.
And it begins with, it's called social emotional learning. And as a matter of fact, New York City just introduced social emotional learning to all grade school. And,
Wow.
and they've hired 900 specialists that are being trained to provide the emotional social learning. And essentially, what it amounts to is that you want to teach the youngsters by using a lot of different ways, role playings, videos, and so on, and self-awareness. And so that if I can sense that I'm feeling something, the goal to be active is when I first sense that something's happening. Okay. So it's self-awareness, and then next follow self-control. So I need to do something about it. And the other one is social awareness. When I observe people around me, can I sense anything about the other party? For example, if I sense that you are in a negative mood, that may be a time for me to respond to you in a very positive, reassuring, comforting way. So self-awareness, self-control, social awareness, relationship management. So I'm going to take that information and make sure that I manage, because I'm in control of me, I hope, myself. And we add to that empathy. And so that those are at least three of the key skills of social emotional learning. And it's worked into everything that we possibly can do with a child in preschool or education, all the way from grade school through high school. And so go to the next part if you like.
Is anything like that? You said New York, are they the first school district in the country? Do we have anything like that throughout the country or not yet?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, it wasn't developed in New York. It was developed at Yale University. And so that it was some time ago, and it's been in effect in quite a while. My son is the um, director of counseling at the school that he'd gone to at elementary school, which is, I can't think of the name of it now, but anyway, he graduated from Brentwood Academy, and he had been director of counseling of that school until last year, and he transferred to where he had gone to preschool. But in any case, and so he's an expert in this, and had actually written a book also on emotional intelligence, and had worked through my company for quite a while. In the
Well,
meantime,
I just can't help but think like when I think about those two boys from about a month ago, the Texas situation. I mean, this kind of thing happens all the time, but like I wonder, yeah, I mean, I don't know what their backgrounds were. It sounds like both of them came from, normal homes, two-parent homes, but I just if there had been any kind of maybe the whole thing could have been prevented had they just it was such a silly or not a silly but such an insignificant it was over a seating arrangement, right? And now two lives. I just what seemed to be what could have probably been if there had been taught tools like you're talking about and what you teach could have been avoided altogether. Like I couldn't help but wonder, because I had three brothers and I could see all of them getting up and, people get caught up in the moment. Instead of confronting someone, maybe they'd be taught like this guy looks upset. Probably better if I just let him go on with it. It's not affecting me if he sits there. I don't know, just all these questions. It's just been haunting me all week. Um, let's talk about
just
like,
a second, let me respond a little bit. No, 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 excuse me, let me interrupt you because I want to go further on this.
yeah.
Sacramento Unified School District had a problem with anger management, fighting among teenage boys. And so they had me come up and take a look at what the situation was. And so that I came up with a program for them, which was instead of suspending kids for fighting, ask the parents if they can be in an anger management class for 1 hour per week for a semester. And in the value of doing that is that in California, if you suspend a kid for any reason, the school, and I don't mean the district, the school loses about $230 a day. So if you suspend a kid for 10 days, you lose two times $203 or whatever. And nobody gains anything. It's punishment for the kid, but it doesn't gain anything. So instead, they get the parents to agree to let the kid stay in school, but he goes to anger management 1 hour a week for the semester. And he would have had the pre-assessment, he would have had a whole semester of classes, and then the post-assessment. That program worked so well. It must have been going on now for about 20 years. And so that, yes, this can be done anywhere in the country, and it is in most places, including Los Angeles Unified School District. It's just that the school district is so large, they haven't invested as much money as I think is needed. But it's a good program and it's expanding pretty much worldwide.
In lieu of the suspension, the anger management. So who do they bring in? Do they bring in psychologists or who's teaching the anger or somebody?
People who were trained by me and use my curriculum.
Oh, okay. I love that. Anderson and
Because it's structured, it's very detailed.
all right, well, let's talk about your training. So you let's just start with the basics for people out there, who have never heard the words emotional intelligence. We all hear of IQ. Can you discuss the difference between the IQ versus the emotional intelligence and why the emotional intelligence is a better predictor of overall success in life? Because everybody thinks like, oh, this kid's got this crazy IQ and they're like Einstein and they're only 12 years old.
IQ is related to one's ability, essentially, to achieve uh, cognitively, as they'd call it. It's how intelligent you are and how you're able to master precision learning. And so that it's not related that much at all to your ability to relate to other human beings. And the other part of it is that mental health has stigmas associated with it. And so that many people are not comfortable being referred to counseling, which is why when they ask me to provide services for physicians, the saddest part is that if a physician, when he or she renews her or his license, they have been in but counseling or psychotherapy and they say they have, it may impact their ability to be relicensed. That's bad news. And so many physicians who commit suicide right now, which is a huge problem, do so because they need help and they are afraid to go for help because of the problems associated with it. So back to emotional intelligence. There's nothing negative at all about what I just described. And so that with emotional intelligence, we are concerned or we are interested in knowing to what extent can a person use his understanding of those simple skills, self-awareness, self-control, social awareness, relationship management, and empathy to master positive relationships with others, but also for himself. It's a very, very effective. It's like if each day you're able to determine that you're starting at a disadvantage, and oh my goodness, there must be something that I need to do. Self-awareness. It's powerful. And you don't have to be a genius. It has nothing to do with your ability to think. It has to do with your ability to recognize your feelings. And so in any case, I don't know if I answered it, but try me again.
No, yeah, you did. And you kind of touched on the what I was going to ask you next. The four domains of emotional intelligence. You mentioned them: self-awareness, self-control, social awareness, and relations. Can you go a little bit deeper? Like what would somebody, if they were in being trained, how are you going to teach them to become more self-aware and social awareness and relationship? And I love that learning that emotional intelligence is a better predictor because we all want, well, most people want a well-rounded life. There's people that are very successful financially and career-wise, but then their marriages fall apart. Families fall apart and they're sad the rest of their life. A neighbor of mine just a couple days ago, I don't know him very well. He's the one I invited over. Well, he came over to help me with my printer. And we've never really had a discussion. It's just been like hi bye in the hallways kind of thing. And he mentioned he was much more, he's from New Zealand and he was just a lot more open than most people. He was telling me he had been married for 20 years and they came over here for a job and he and his wife, their marriage kind of fell apart during COVID, as a lot of marriages did, right? And she wanted him to work on these. They had been together for 20 years since high school. And now he was really open to therapy and he's doing all these meditation and working on himself. But he told me that she really wanted him to do some of these kinds of things, but he wasn't receptive to it at the time. And now he is because he's very lonely, like she was probably right. So as far as emotional intelligence, I felt so sad for him because she's moved on. She had moved away with another boyfriend, and here he is 2.5 years later still sounded like he's quite lonely and sad. And maybe again, if they had been taught or if he had been more receptive to some of these, but how would you delve into this if someone's being trained by your company?
I'd like to just show you two instruments. The assessment that we use, you first of all have to be trained to use the assessment, which is quite involved and very expensive. And so the areas that it covers would be is under self-perception. You have self-regard, self-actualization, and emotional self-awareness. So it's more than what I was describing. It's much more detail. The next category is stress management. And under stress management, you have flexibility, stress tolerance, optimism. Just think about it. What happens, just common sense tell you if you discover that a person is pessimistic as opposed to optimism, or his scores in optimism are very low. Right away, what does that tell you? He's probably suffering from depression, isn't it? In any case, so then you have self-expression, and under that you have emotional expression, assertiveness, independence. Then under decision making, you have problem solving, impulse control, and then under interpersonal, you have interpersonal relationships, you have empathy, and you have social responsibility. That's the assessment that you take, and the results. It's like 26 pages. No, no, it's detailed. No, no, it's very important
Yeah,
because that tells you and the client what needs to occur. And so that when you look at it like this, I don't know if you can see that,
yeah.
but what I can tell you is that it's a scale. And so the low range is from 0 to 90. The mid range is from 90 to 110. The high range is from 110 to 130. Ideally, you want a physician, and this is from a physician from Saudi Arabia. You want that physician to score everything in the high range, which is 110 to 130. And so that in this particular case, the lowest score that this guy has is flexibility. And so his score in flexibility is 84. That's not good. That's not good, right? And if it was in something like self-regard, I tell you an interesting story that's funny, not funny at all. I'm meeting with this physician, and he's a brain surgeon, and his score in self-regard was like 40. And I said, Doctor, I think you made a mistake here. And I said, I don't mind giving you the assessment again. And he shook his head and he says, No, that's not the case at all. He says, I graduated from Harvard School of Medicine, and so did my father. I specialize in brain surgery, and so does my father. I'm an only child. And he says, when I graduated from high school, I said to my father, Dad, do you realize that I made straight A's all the way through grade school? He says, my dad looked at me and said, Are you kidding? Why do you think we sent you to private school? We expected you to make straight A's. He says, during my father's lifetime, he never once said, I love you. And he said, that's why my scores are low. All of the adults that I see, they have a book and they have two books. And so this is one, and this book is 153 pages. This is if you want to do what I do, and that is to provide emotional intelligence assessment, right?
This is
And
to train, I mean, people, is this for the average consumer? I just want to improve myself, or if I want to be one of your teachers?
now, if you're the average consumer, this is where you're going to go
Oh,
here, and then you will go to one of my books, depending on what it is. You know, if it's physician, is a separate book. If it's just for the general public, it's a book like this, right? And so that it's more focused. It's on anger management for adults, anger management for adolescents, or anger management for leaders, which would include physicians. It's very detailed, but it's useful. Not only that, go ahead.
no,
Another
I
question.
mean, well, there's this. What are some of the methods? So let's say somebody scores really low, like self-regard, or let's say social awareness, or relationship management, because a lot of relationships fall apart. What are some of the? How would you go about improving that? What are some of the tools? Or because you've talked
Okay.
about like some role playing kind of situations, how would you work on that? Let's say I took this test and I scored really low, a 40 in relationship management.
It's more structured than that.
Okay.
There is in the assessment at the very first week, the second meeting after you get this, it says action plan. This is for the client. I have a copy. He has a copy. And it tells you the steps below. It asks you, what are your suggestions as to how you can achieve changes in the areas that you score low? And it's detailed. So he writes it in his own handwriting. If he doesn't know, you help him a little bit. Well, so then that's what you do for the time that you're with the client. If it's a semester for a kid, or if it's 12 weeks for an adult, or if you go to the course, and I advise the course at their request. And so what I said is that let's assume it's road rage, which is a bad news in Los Angeles in particular.
Yeah.
No, it's really
No,
bad.
I've seen people just they
Yeah,
just lose their minds.
it's really, really bad. In any case, and it's getting worse. And so that the judges said, how long should we ask a person to come? And I says, if it's really serious in your opinion, it should be 52 sessions. You know how long that is? That's a year, once a week for an hour. But it's the same thing. They have a specific program. And so that you have maybe 10 or 15 people in a group, and each person has his workbook. And so you go from the beginning of the book until the end, videos, everything you can think about. But that's the goal, is to achieve whatever it is that you had set out to for you, the individual, based on your scores, right? So,
Yeah. Well, you've mentioned that impulse control is one of the most needed interventions, and can you elaborate on that, like from teenagers to adults, and how you would, I guess that would be assessed, but what are some of the techniques that we would, what makes you say that that's the most needed?
latest example was last week. A teenage football player who's really, really very good. So embarrassing because his dad is a coach at his school. And he found out, this is the strangest thing I've ever heard. He found out that his sister, who's graduated from high school, is dating a kid who is on his football team. And he beat him out.
Because he
He,
was dating his sister?
yeah, don't ask me. I can't answer the question. I don't know why he did it, but he did it. And it's like, what do you call that? Was that impulse control?
I see a lot of adults not being able to handle rejection, right? And like whether it's a divorce, there's some, we all know people that maybe they've been divorced for 20 or 30 years. And when you talk to them, it sounds like it happened last week. They're still bitter and angry. Um, I've always thought, like, I wonder, it sounds so corny. Like, is that something? I don't recall a discussion ever, like in high school or junior high, where your parents sit you down, or a teacher or a class, or where they say, look, let's talk about emotions. And sooner or later, at some point in your life, you're all going to face rejection, whether it's a friendship that ends, somebody doesn't want to be your friend, a romantic relationship that goes south, right? A job, you didn't get the job you wanted, you were bad. People, and then of course this leads, I mean, it leads to murder sometimes. We see that all the time. People are, they're divorced. Somebody wants to not be with them anymore, and they get divorced and they kill them because, and I just can't, have such a hard time. Like, why did you have to kill them? Why couldn't you just let them leave, But do you think this is something, what do you think is going on with rejection? And do you think it's a skill that could be taught, like talking about it, teaching kids how to handle this?
But you don't want to focus on one skill because you'll never get there.
Oh,
What is happening is that private schools are more likely to do this than public schools because they can afford it and they won't have any trouble at all convincing the parents that it's useful. So
okay.
I bet if you check with some of the schools you already know, they already are doing social emotional learning.
Social emotional learning. So I would love to hear, a couple. That was fun, like a personal story. A couple, like, of your, let's say, before and after, whether it was kids, like somebody, the worst case that maybe you ever had, and where you saw, like, they saw the light, or they got it and they changed their life. I mean, I'm sure you've helped thousands and thousands of people, but there a couple that really stand out?
Yeah, a physician who referred to me, and he was basically told in advance that if it wasn't successful, that he would be terminated. And it was from a position that he really liked. It was a medical school, right? And so that same physician did so well, and that he wound up being appointed as chair of whatever it is his department was. And so that was like super duper uh, viewed as successful, not by him, but also by the school itself. And so then they started referring me difficult cases because they thought that I had done that well with that one and probably could with others. A road rage won't be quite as complicated as a physician, right? Because the physician's scores are not in the average. And in terms of the physician, you have to be prepared. And so that it isn't that he is more somehow deprived or problematic. It's just that the standards are higher as they should be because you're teaching skills, you're not addressing pathology. However, if there are advantages, which has happened in my case. It's like one of the other persons who is on a very, very high level, and he's older also. He has a PhD, but think about the question. He has a PhD from UCLA in business. And so I ask you, do you think that the physician who has low scores in emotional intelligence would accomplish more if he's provided services by a person who's master in business as opposed to emotional intelligence and psychopathology, counseling and psychotherapy, all of those things. You get it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the mental health person can screen out, can tell you in advance. And so I could easily say to the physician at my first meeting, and you also would be advised to begin in psychotherapy now with someone else, right? Or we can cheat. I can do both.
Do you work with police officers or I've had a couple of discussions over the last year and they have a really high suicide rate. Uh just I mean, shockingly, I didn't know that. And they just see the worst of the worst. So I wonder if that's what's going on with all of our poor police officers. I have been told that they have access to a lot of therapy and mental health services. So I just don't know. What do you work with the law enforcement or first responders, firemen and these kinds of folks?
Yeah, in particular, we used to have contracts with like smaller. We had the sheriff's department from like Ventura County,
Oh,
and we had El Monte Police Department, and so on. So that they contract, and we had Los Angeles Unified School District Police Department. So they contract in that they make the deferrals based on need. And in those particular cases, they would come. I never had any of those come to my house. They come directly to the office, which is no longer, I don't do that myself anymore at all. But that was sort of a formal kind of thing. But yes,
do
and
you
those are needed.
do you
The
know?
surprising one though was
Oh,
fire department. It never occurred to me that we really should reach out to fire departments until I received one in Northern California. And then he shared with me, you can't imagine what it's like for us. And so then I started at least announcing to them and started training people, their own people who wanted to be provide anger management.
anger management.
Yeah.
Do you notice a difference between sexes? Like, are women or men harder to treat, or do they have different kinds of skill set challenges? Any differences in between women and men? Do you work on just as many women as you do
No,
men?
not as many because you don't get that many referrals of women. I don't. And so the women, if you ask me, are more willing to change. They tend to work harder and more likely to follow agreements. In other words, if you tell me you're going to read something between now and next week, if it's female, it's probably going to happen within
Oh,
them. Maybe,
that's
and
good.
maybe no.
All right. So again, like people now, so you're not having people at your home. So talk about I think you have something coming up in June. How does it work and how do people participate?
Yeah. They have something in California that's called First Five. And what it is that any child in the state of California who is five or under, the state provides a wide range of services for families. And so let me narrow it down a little bit. If a child is in a family in which there's domestic violence, you can anticipate problems for that particular child. And it could start with just in terms of milestone developments. And it can turn being delayed in any of the functions you could think about, or it could be the baby who's colicky and so on. And so the training that I'm having on the 6th, I think it's the 4th and 5th of June, is focused on organizations who provide anger management for parents of children who may be victims of family violence.
Oh,
And so that means that the parents, whether you're the perpetrator or the victim, the perpetrator will have to pay for his or her services. This is the anger management. And if he needs psychotherapy or whatever, right? The victim get the same services that he or she may need, and it's paid for by the county because the money would have already been provided. And so that the group that I start with is 7 people who are from Kern County. And those same parents have to take classes in parenting and so on. And so, in addition, anyone else who wants to attend because they want to specialize in providing anger management to courts, it's like when people are divorcing in California and there are children involved, you also will have anger in relation to child support and visitation. And the judges are aware of this, and so they automatically will mandate that both of the parents, in addition to whatever else, go for anger management. And so, in order for you to, as a person, to provide that service, you must be trained, must be certified, and my certifications are accepted statewide by just about every governmental agency.
and so how long will they be? So they're going to come to a physical location?
No,
Oh,
what happened is that we start things in advance. I send them lots of material in advance, including my books. Are they actually going to read what I send them? Probably not, but at least they will have it. And so the goal would be to read as much as you can of whatever that I sent. And then the training is only 2 days. It used to be 40 hours of training. So you still get credit for 40 hours of training. But with the exception of those 2 days, the rest of that training is on you. You have the material, and it's up to you as to whether or not you really take advantage of it.
so
But that's
anybody who's going to be dealing with teaching anger management could attend, kind of thing.
what wants to be. Yeah, you don't have to have any experience. But these organizations are now realizing it's to their advantage because if you try to do something and you're not really prepared, no one gains. Except if you start early in life and you learn what your weaknesses and strengths are, you're in a better position to manage them. That's the difference. Example, yet another book, which I won't bring out at this point, has pointed out if your scores in emotional intelligence are high, let's say in college, your income is likely to be greater than someone whose scores are low. Can you imagine that? What's the relationship
Mm.
between high income and high scores in emotional intelligence? It's really, really significant.
So what,
And so one quick thing. Have you ever
oh, take
heard
your time.
oh my goodness, I can't think of his name now. Anyway, there's a super millionaire from Nebraska, Warren Buffett. Have you heard of that name?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And guess what Warren Buffett is? An advocate of emotional intelligence. For what? Money, investments.
Oh, oh, you
And
mean
I,
what do you mean? Like he talks about it like he's been trained that the more better skill, higher you
he
score.
was not trained, he learned from experience, but he advocates you should be aware and take advantage of mastering emotional intelligence in your interactions with people and your decisions in buying and selling.
I was just curious, like what's left on your bucket list, or
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm going to right now. I'm already in the process of attempting to train people who may be interested in buying different parts of it and selling the whole thing. And then my son wants me to write.
so we'll wrap it up. Do you think there's hope for everyone as far as wanting to become more self-aware. We think pretty much anybody can utilize this and become better than they are.
I would rather say not anybody, most.
Well,
Yeah, because the level, for example, with some people, if there's some reason, for example, if you're severely psychotic, re there's nothing really that one can do.
I see.
Or if you are brain damaged from any other kind of illness, or if you're retarded. So no, not everybody, but be modest. I think that many people, or most, can benefit.
One of the things I think about with emotional intelligence, it's just kind of off topic, but I started thinking while you were like, I know in the last few years, I have a thing about, especially with doctors, if they have to deliver bad news, like how much more it just seems more empathetic and human if they can say it to you in person. There's one, I had like a procedure, I don't know, it was a year ago, and I remember like, I thought the doctor was going to come in. It was just somebody came in and it was really bad news, but it wasn't the doctor. It was kind of like done via a courier or almost a messenger. And I called my primary when I got home and was like, this is terrible. You need to like, if it's bad or scary news, it should come from you. And there was no empathy. It's until you're in that position of receiving bad news, it maybe people don't realize that they can make people feel like they're just a number, and how scary it can be when you're waiting for a test result or something like that, right? Like to me, that seems like it would be emotional intelligence. Hey,
It absolutely is. And there was one physician that I saw from a medical school locally. And his problem was that if he had patients, and he was a surgeon, if he had patients who were not likely to make it, he didn't want to be the person to share with the family. He didn't want to do it, and he wouldn't do it. And so that was one of my clients. That was really, really difficult. But
did
you're
he
right.
did he get past it because the family
The
would
answer to you
absolutely.
honestly was no. And
Oh,
guess what we did? Because I try to gain from everything. We got to hospital to agree that they would let the anesthesiologist who worked with him all the time, let the anesthesiologist be the key person in situations like that. That's not the way it's supposed to be, but that's what we did.
just too hard for him. But that would go along the lines of emotional intelligence, right? Yeah, yeah, for sure. And
Great.
thank you, George. It means a
Okay,
lot.
I enjoyed this. Call me whenever you want. And if
Okay.
you want to hear these things, you want something else to read, I'd be happy to send you something. Let me know.
Well, I have a couple, but they're not that one. I have let me see here. Let's see. I'll show you which ones you had sent me. I read them last summer by the pool. You had sent me this one.
That's for teenagers, yeah.
Oh, okay, controlling ourselves and gaining control of ourselves.
That's for adults, yeah.
Okay. And then the practice of control.
This is the one that was awkward, but anyway, this is the one for physicians, and so that yeah. But I was talking about you should have a copy of this. You can just buy it from Amazon.com.
Okay, the edge, emotional.
If you read this whole book, you'll learn more about emotional intelligence than anyone you ever met.
Okay, the EQ edge. All right. Well, and that's a must. So anybody out there, well, I'm going to be encouraging everyone to read it. So yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay.
it's going to help you.
And then they just go to your website to try to come up to it.
Yeah, and my website is emotionalintelligenceforphysicians.com.
Okay. To see about your upcoming program, and you said that's in
Yeah,
January.
they can sign up through there.
All right.
Thank you so much. I look forward to hearing the results.
Okay. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody, for joining us for another episode of American Mood Swings, where we talk about the brain and all things mental health. Hope to see you next week, and please share with your friends.